Okay, I would like to welcome everyone come to the day 2 panel 5th Chinese popular religion in Southeast Asia, religious development among the Maritime Silk Road. We have a 4 paper in the first hour, and then I'll invite the discussant to come for the comment. And then we will have roughly 25 minutes, 30 minutes for the open up discussion. So we have a very tight schedule. My name is Weishan Huang. I'm from Hong Kong Suyang University. I would like to invite the first speaker, Emily. You have the floor. You're welcome to share the screen when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm just trying to share. That's not working.
Yes.
Okay. You can see?
Yes.
Okay. Can see it? Okay. Listen, I am having problems with my PowerPoint. It appears both Ken and I have new computers, and so a lot of my photos aren't loading. However, it's really not that important. I think what's more important is just listening to the few words that I have to say. So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in this conference. And I think it's really interesting and dynamic so far. I want to just say a few words about a piece of research that I've been doing, which is also included in another of David Palmer's BRINFAITH project and collaboration. So I had, introduced myself yesterday. My name is Emily Hertzman. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I've been working for the past, I guess, over 10 years now, doing ethnographic research in a Chinese Indonesian community in the city of Singkawang, West Kalimantan. So my research, my current research is mapping and analyzing local forms of Chinese religion in the city, and trying to understand particularly the ways that a new class of spirits have entered the spirit medium traditions of ethnically Chinese spirit mediums over the past 2 decades. So the setting for this research is Singkawang, West Kalimantan, which is a majority Chinese Indonesian city on the west coast of Borneo. Since the post-Reformasi changes in the rights and freedoms of Chinese cultural expression in Indonesia, the local Chinese Indonesian community has been engaged in a major Chinese religious revival in which interethnic spirit medium practices figure strongly. So at the center of this revival are processes of recreating Chinese Indonesian identities in relation to both highly localized gods, spirits, and territorially grounded senses of belonging, and re-Sinicization processes that relate to transnational circulations of Chinese language education, media circulations within a kind of greater Chinese cultural sphere. So as I've been suggesting in my comments throughout this workshop, I see clearly that as China rises as a global superpower, manifesting political and economic hegemony through investments in ambitious infrastructural development projects along the territories within the imagined Belt Road Initiative, including the Maritime Silk Road, which runs through Indonesia, members of overseas Chinese communities, and specifically this socially, culturally, and geographically peripheral community in Singkawang, are realigning themselves symbolically and imaginatively with China as a social historical force in the world. But this realignment is complicated and a fraught process. So in this paper, I argue that in the case of Singkawang, in the case of Singkawang's ethnic Chinese community, this alignment rarely involves participation in large physical infrastructure projects of the BRI, but instead involves participating in a kind of figurative or symbolic aspects of transnational Chinese religion. So I explain how alongside the material infrastructures, the figurative aspects of Chinese religion act as what I call a shadow infrastructure, which transports practitioners into a transnational realm of stories, myths, and politics, in which divine bureaucrats demonstrate their power, or Ling, by interacting with and intervening in people's daily lives. This paper presents a specific argument about the symbolic aspects of being a Chinese religious practitioner in the context of Indonesia in general, and Singkawang specifically, in relation to the rise of China as a major global economic force in the world, which has specific civilizational imaginings that take many forms, but one form are the massive infrastructure projects along including along the newly imagined Maritime Silk Road presented here. So I argue that for Chinese Indonesians in Singkawang, despite a potential for imagined ethnic affinities and ancestral connections with people and places in China, these affinities are constrained by different national histories in 20th century in China and Indonesia, respectively, differences in social class and sub-ethnic identities, as well as local cultural norms. So major obstacles exist for Hakka-speaking Chinese Indonesians from Singkawang to identify with and participate within the large Chinese-sponsored infrastructural projects taking place locally, as well as throughout Indonesia. But in lieu of this, however, I argue that locals have an extensive and highly developed Chinese religious infrastructure, which is both material and symbolic, and has remained remarkably intact through eras of repression, distributing and circulating the raw materials that people use to understand and interpret their lives, their moral dilemmas, their health, and the larger forces controlling and animating the universe. This operates as a shadow infrastructure, running beneath the more dominant and physically assertive infrastructures developed by the Indonesian state, Chinese bilateral investments, but it is also central to local identifications and communal religious practices. The BRI is not a single orchestrated master plan. Rather, on the ground, it is comprised of hundreds of disparate infrastructural development projects led by various state and non-state actors and collectivities. So as a totality, particularly via the richly symbolic names of the Belt Road Initiative and the Maritime Silk Road, a new civilizational imaginary is being constructed in which the image of China and its place in the world and in relation to other people and nation states is being redefined. Part of this definition is an image of China as a great power, a prosperous nation, a developed economy capable of being a giver as opposed to a recipient of aid, as a leader and a builder of international networks and monumental infrastructures of global historical importance. So while critics and pundits rightfully point out that the territorial expansion involved in the Belt Road Initiative and the Maritime Silk Road involve many forms of both hard and soft power, huge monetary, material, and human resource investments, these initiatives, I want to suggest, are at the same time a way of symbolizing a new moment in China's own civilizational development. And I'm really indebted to David Palmer and his own thinking on this. At least we can interpret it in this way. So through these development processes, China is reinscribing itself into and onto world history in new ways. In this paper, I argue that for diasporic Chinese and Sinophone communities around the world, this also marks an important moment of reckoning in which to take account of what China's new civilizational imaginary might mean for them and their identities, which are at least partially based on some shared historic, ancestral, ethnic, or linguistic connections. So how are diasporic Chinese communities positioning themselves in relation to China's new geographic imaginary? This is a particularly important question to take up in Southeast Asia because it's a priority area of BRI development envisioned as this Maritime Silk Road route. And It's home to the world's largest and most diverse population of diasporic Chinese people who have extensive centuries of extensive experience negotiating relationships with mainland China, brokering exchanges between China and Southeast Asian states, and maintaining many different kinds of transnational networks, be they business, religious, fraternal, and so on. So if we view the BRI as a series of infrastructural projects that collectively communicate and substantiate China's new civilizational and geopolitical imaginary, then we may ask how Chinese Indonesians specifically, as citizen subjects of Indonesia, but with long and complicated ancestral connections to China, forms of Chinese language, culture, and cosmology, may choose to identify with these modern civilizational revivals, practically and symbolically. Oh, sorry, there's a picture missing, a couple of pictures missing here that didn't show up. So what I present in this paper is that for the case of Singapore Chinese, this often involves an internal ambivalence about the role and value of wealth and business, as many locals aspire to be wealthy at a scale large enough to contribute to regional infrastructural development, but few have the material, social, or symbolic resources to practically be a part of that process. The power which comes from national prosperity that is now projected outwards by the BRI is something that locals respect and are often in awe of, according to my conversations with interlocutors in Singkawang, but are individually far removed from, and in some cases disappointed about, as the vagaries of different national development trajectories in Indonesia and China over the 21st century have led to vastly differing circumstances and conditions to seek prosperity. So despite lower levels of wealth and socioeconomic status that could lead to transnationally recognized forms of prestige, power, and cosmopolitanism, local Singkawang Chinese have an elaborate religious infrastructure, which provides spiritual and moral authority at important moments in their lives, and it is increasingly visible in the public sphere. So while I don't want to go into much more detail in this presentation, I would just like to say that this situation is further complicated by the ambiguous position of the Chinese ethnic minority in Indonesia, who have over centuries been variously included and excluded, afforded certain privileges and denied rights and freedoms, been targets of violence, and being stereotyped and scapegoated as clannish and conspiratorially dominating the economy. Because Chineseness is in many ways constructed as a social class marker, as opposed to a cultural or linguistic designation, this has made it somewhat problematic for Chinese Indonesians to be both poor and at the same time aspiring to be wealthy. But that is exactly what the majority of Chinese Indonesians community in Singkawang is doing. So to be wealthy and successful via one's own business pursuits is a widely held aspiration for locals, but must always be tempered by a recognition that to become too wealthy or to be seen as being too wealthy can play into already unsafe circumstances for Chinese in Indonesia, who have periodically been the targets of popular racist sentiments that can quickly lead to violence and property destruction. So what I argue in this paper is that there exists this other world of Chinese religiosity, which is undergoing expansion and differentiation, in which an imagined bureaucracy of gods and spirits that form a unified and hierarchical polity are actually providing a secondary sort of infrastructure, running alongside both the Indonesian state infrastructure and the civilizational imaginings, physical infrastructures, and their geopolitical power created through China's global rise and the BRI and the Maritime Silk Road. So this shadow infrastructure connects locals with spiritual resources in which to make sense of their lives, interpret their predicaments, mediate between sacred and secular aspects of their lives by giving structure and providing moral exemplars through the constant communication with gods and spirits that takes place through spirit medium consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And actually, you saved us more than 2 minutes. So we're going to move on to the second speaker. Let me invite the Sisi, right? That's a co-author with Kang. Thank you, Sisi. You have the floor. While Sisi is preparing the PowerPoint, I would like to correct myself. This is sorry, this is a panel 4. Yeah, not panel 5. Sisi, can you? Yes, that's perfect now.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Professor Huang, and hello everyone. I'm Sisi from the National University of Singapore, and grateful to the organizers for making this conference possible. Today we will share a case study of Singapore-based shophouse Huat, in Mandarin, and its Sino-Singapore embroidery trade in the 20th century. As this is a giant written paper, so I will handle the presentation, and Dr. Kang will address any topic-related questions during the Q&A. So special thanks to the shop owner, Mr. Jeff, for his general sharing, and Mr. Victor and Professor Kenneth Dean for guiding us in Singapore fieldwork. We have organized our presentation into the following 6 sections, and Huat is still operational today. This page shows an exquisite altar at the center of this shop house, which is a great example of the intertwining of religions and commercial activities. Over the altar table hangs a colorful lantern, and the lantern is embroidered with a beautiful design and the Chinese characters Wen Zhang Fa. And in the center of this photo background, there is a picture of Teochew's charitable host main deity, Great Master Song Dafeng Zu Shi, with a red embroidered ancestor tablet. On the left and right side, you will find respectively a flower vase and a wooden Chinese painting screen. On the front altar table, there is a wooden offering box adorned with gold, along with a matching candlestick pair. This table is covered with a fancy embroidered apron. I want to say that most of the items in this picture are actually the kind of products they have been selling during all those years in business. So we are curious about how has religion shaped the business, and scholars have demonstrated that among the Chinese communities in Southeast Asia, popular religion and associated rituals are both widespread and crucial. Also, studies on Chinese business reveals that merchants rely on their personal connections and institutional arrangement to ensure their commerce flowed smoothly across Southeast Asia. So in this paper, we will demonstrate the interaction between business and religion. Now let's take a look at the network on Huat and the Teochew charitable hall first. Teochew or Chaozhou in Mandarin is a cultural and linguistic group from Guangzhou Chaoshan region in eastern China, and as one of the major dialect groups in Singapore, the number of Teochew immigrants increased rapidly during the first half of the 20th century. In 1935, a man named Wen Shengxiu, also known as Ong Jianghua, from a village in Teochew came to Singapore with the help of his fellow countrymen. On this page, in his certificate of admission, it states his occupation as a bill collector. When he got here, Teochew charitable halls in Southeast Asia were booming. By 2002, 2012, there were more than 16 charitable halls in Singapore, Western Malaysia, and Thailand. The actual number could be higher than this. This page shows some charitable halls and their branches established in the early days. 修得响灯扬心小 or 修得上堂养心社 in Mandarin, and its branches indicated by the orange color in this page have a closer and long-standing relationship with Hua's business. The network of charitable halls also included music and opera groups. They perform music as part of their daily routine. Some charitable halls were actually developed by musician organizations. As a Teochew, Mr. Hua joined the charitable hall events in Singapore. He was actively involved in Xiu De Shang Tang's Jingyue group, which focuses on chanting and musician performances. The charitable hall activities impacted Hua's business time because you can see on this page, Wen Shengxiu left a contact form that is still present on the shop table today. The first line contains contact details of the crucial business partners, such as the charitable halls and the musician associations, highlighted by the red line on this page. This leads us to the next part. Teochew's embroidery form dates back to the Qing dynasty, and much of it was used for religious purpose. Charitable halls ritual wouldn't be completed without embroidery. As a major ritual team in the association, Jingyue Group handles festival performances, god birthdays, and associations anniversary, and more, and usually performed in front of the offering stage. The left image in this page is a 1950s order sketch, and the right side displays the offering stage in 1951. You may remember that the center hall of the shop house we saw at the very beginning of this presentation retained elements from this style. And the current offering stage has a similar structure of this sketch. During last year's Hungary Go Host Festival, aside from the main hall dedicated to Song Dafeng Zhushi and also adorned with embroidery, the offering stage served as a temporary yet exclusive palace for the Buddhas of three ages and other Buddhas associated with afterlife. Actually, the offering stage could also be transformed into the theoretical stage when necessary. In this point, we'd like to emphasize that the presence of the offering stage created a space for ritual and musician performances within the hall. And those whole events directly influenced the scope of Hua's operation. At the very beginning, starting like in 1937, its primary business was tailoring. However, because Mr. Ong got involved with the Jingyue Group, he expanded his business into an embroidery agency and helping the charitable halls and its branches order embroidery products. So this Singapore-based shop had strong connection with China. Over time, embroidery has topped Teochew customer export records. In the early 1950s, Singapore and Malaysia stood as the secondary Teochew product export regions. This page displays letters between Mr. Ong and his business partners, relatives acting as contact in China. Ko and Home Embroidery and Department Store, or Xu Bingfeng Xiuzhuang in Mandarin, and the Taishan Embroidery store were the two major Teochew suppliers for Hua. Shunxinhang was a government-licensed exporter, possibly government-funded, and also based in Shuado, was highly recommended by Ong's residents in China for importing goods. and Hong Kong remains to be the entry port for the goods shipped from Teochew to Singapore. But after the PRC government applied state and private joint ownership policies, the ordering process was changed. Because previously, Mr. used to send his orders directly mailed to his partners in Teochew, and the products would arrive in Singapore via Hong Kong. However, under the new policies, Singaporean shops had to send a letter to the new established export company, and they also can buy letters of credit from bank, typically the Bank of China, and forward them to the export company. Upon receiving those letters, the company would ship the goods directly to Singapore instead of via Hong Kong. But the good news was Ong Tianhua's former business partner, as well as the owner of Taishan, Wei Yinong, also entered this export company. This greatly eased his business operation. This shop also export other region products like wooden offering boxes through the export company, and based on the correspondence between the 1954 to 1964, Ong's shop primarily served charitable halls and operate troops with embroidery products. As mentioned before, charitable halls often engage the opera troops for performances, leading to business connections between the troops and the shop. But largely influenced by the policies in mainland China, this shop transformed into a Chinese culture business after the 1960s. Because during that time, the Cultural Revolution broke out in mainland China. The embroidery products were considered as part of the Four Oaths, 四旧, and prohibited from being produced and exported. As you can see in this figure, during this moment, the output value of the Teochew embroidery factory experienced a sharp decline. So the son of Wen Shengxiu, the shop's new owner, had to reconsider their business structures, and this shop became an agent for selling leather shoes and slippers. The importance of the musician instructions in their business increased. By the 1970s, musician instructions took over as Ong's main focus and constituting over 16% of the total imported value in 1973. However, this proportion declined to around 65% 7 years later. This was due to the recovering of the embroidery business, particularly since the 1980s, through the connection with the Xiangtai company in Hong Kong, and the charitable hall remains consistent customers for Ong Tianhua, while his families continue to donate to them and contribute to the association. A very quick conclusion. Ong Tianhua's history and its link to charitable hall shows the interaction between business and religion, and the founder Wen Shengxiu played a key role in the charitable hall. And with the rise of Teochew charitable hall in Singapore and Malaysia, Ong Tianhua transformed from a small tailoring shop to a specialized embroidery establishment. And the establishment business suffered during China's Cultural Revolution, but thanks to the support of charitable halls, it recovered in the 1980s. Over time, Ong Tianhua expanded his business to include a wider range of products linked to religion and ceremonies. There are many more interesting stories about this shop, but due to the time limits, we can only mention them briefly. We welcome comments and any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you, Sisi. Later, we will also invite the co-author Kang to join us for Q&A section. Next speaker will be Chi. You have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me and see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Wu Qi, and of course, thank Emily for inviting me to join this panel, and also all the other organizers. So this project is one, and this story, the case study of Singapore's Xiaqing Huang clan, is one of the featuring story in my project concerning Singapore's kampong heritage and Chinese temples. Well, this project is still at its very initial stage, so all kind of questions and comments are really welcomed. And today I'm going to talk about how the Xiaqing Huang clan, they replicate their hometown in Singapore and how they preserve their traditions under different circumstances and how they trace their roots and also to build a worldwide network at the same time. So now let's take a look at where is Xiaqing. So it is in the Fujian province of China, Quanzhou area, Anxi County. It's a small village on the northeast of the much more famous place Hutou. So Hutou should be somewhere here. And this small town can be dates back to the Ming Dynasty, and the original name was Xiaqing. Well, what is coincidental is that prior to their amendment of the name from Xiaqing to Xiakeng, Nanyang immigrants from Xiaqing has always referring to this place as Xiakeng, as the pronunciation in Hokkien is quite similar. Well, the founder of this small town is Huang Xianxuan. So Huang Xianxuan moved from Yongchun to Xiaqing, and he's considered as the Kaijizu of the whole place. And that is also the reason why most of the villagers are carrying the same surname Huang. And today, this small village has expanded from the original humble size to having taken over 3 other villages nearby. So you can see the position of Xiaqing, also named as Xiakeng, compared to Hutou, and this place is standing at 736 meters above the sea level, so it's also referred to as Xiashan, the Mount Xia. Well, this hall is the ancestral hall for Huang Xianxuan in Xiaqing. And the first generation of Xiaqing immigrants arrived in Singapore in around 1885. And through immigration train, the population of Xiaqing people came to Singapore has been rising after the first generation. Their life in Singapore is more stabilized. And gradually, they replicated their hometown in this new land. And in fact, those people those Xiaqing people living in Singapore, they are not really living together. Of course, firstly, they tend to live together to better support each other, but as more people came, one single settlement is not enough to host all those people. So they start to spread out, and finally they settle down in 5 main settlements. And here are the maps for the 5 settlements. I'm still working on the map, so there are some problems in the map for now. And in fact, they do not live in the same location, but rely on their blood tie, their geographical tie, and importantly, their shared belief in Wugong Zhenxian. So they built an imagined community in Singapore. And now let's focus on the Wugong Zhenxian belief. Well, Wugong Zhenxian is the main god of their hometown temple. This hometown temple is still there today. It's called Longfeng Dong. It's in Xiaqing and is standing in front of the mountain. But why the name is Longfeng? Longfeng means dragon and phoenix, because the mountain behind it, there are 2 mountain peaks facing each other. Those 2 mountain peaks are considered as Long and Feng in Feng Shui. That's why they named this temple Longfeng Dong. Well, the younger generation in Xiaqing nowadays still worship Wukong Zhenxian. Wukong Zhenxian is not a very popular and widespread god. We only managed to find those ones other than the one in Xiaqing and Singapore. As in Fujian Dehua, Fujian Yongchun, and Dafu. And in Nanyang, the other one is in Zhouhao. It's also an ancestral temple, but for the clan of Zheng. Maybe they have some connection, or there are some connection between their mother temple in Yongchun and the one in Xiaqing. Well, this photo is the old photo of Ling Tong in Singapore before they moved into the United Temple. Well, Singapore's Ling Tong can be regarded as a sub-branch of Long Feng Dong in Xiaqing. It was brought into Singapore in 1885 by the first generation of Xiaqing immigrants. At first, it's only a very small shrine in their settlements, so they could still continue their Xiaqing custom to worship their hometown god. And it is also a way to replicate their hometown. And gradually, they managed to build an altar and finally a temple in the area around Yunnan Garden. Well, Yunnan Garden is not in mainland China, Yunnan. It's the name of a place in Zhurong area in Singapore. And Wukong Zhenxian's birthday was celebrated every year during the Kangpeng era and also nowadays. So people at all 5 settlements, they would attend this big anniversary of Wukong Zhenxian's birthday. And the beliefs and practices related to their hometown gods sort of connected all these scattered Xiaqing Huang clan members living in 5 settlements in Singapore. And this custom went on for decades until the 1970s. In the 70s, due to land acquisition, residents of the various settlements were forced to relocate and scattered throughout different parts of Singapore. Well, here are some old photos of Wukong Zhenxian's birthday celebration back in the 70s and 80s. You can see it's very grandeur. And fearing that they would lose their traditions, so some active Xiaqing Huang clansmen, they sought for the inheritance of Wukong Zhenxian, so they started to raise funds and they built the Ling Tong and Hulam Tabaigong United Temple with the permission of the government. So in 1983, they were allotted a new premise in Bukit Batok area, and 4 years after the construction is completed. Well, here are some old photos when the new United Temple is under construction, and you can see on the right-hand corner here, there are 2 temporary temples for Hulam Tabaigong and the Wukong Zhenxian Long Feng Dong. So here is the current Long Feng Dong and Hulam Tabaigong temple. You can see Long Feng Dong is in the main altar, and on the right-hand side, you can see Tabaigong here. And this small statue on your right-hand side, this is the original statue which people brought to Singapore back in late 1880s. And a fun fact is that because people used to believe the deity statue can cure illness, therefore the back of this statue is slightly, not really slightly, is quite damaged, as many people were digging the back to take it back home for their relatives in poor house in the past. Is no longer allowed nowadays. And the new statue sitting in the front altar, the artist making this statue is the great-grandson of the artist making the original old statue. Well, in post-Kangpeng era, the 5 settlements people, they were categorized as 5 groups. They called it different groups, different zu. So those 5 groups, they take turns to host the celebration. And the Chinese lineage concept of house was redefined here into groups. And when 2 strangers met in their place, they will ask each other, which group are you from? And normally they can guess which branch are you from? And if you tell him your name, they can more or less tell your generation together with the branch. Well, currently the temple is open to the public, but it's different from other public temples. They have this clan backgrounds. It's a natural blood ties. So those supporters, they have stronger motivation to support the temple. And non-Xiaqing people, Huang clansmen from non-Xiaqing regions are also joining this temple as well. And of course, there are some new immigrants as well. But the development of Longfengdong in Singapore is still going inwards instead of expanding and commercializing. And also is a place for them to think about their original hometown, to meet their old kampong friends. It serves like a linking for all Singaporeans originating from Xiaqing. And before the epidemic, Longfengdong always organized their members to go back to their ancestral hall in Longfeng Ancestral Temple, Ancestral Hall in Xiaqing every year, and usually there will be from 12 to 40 people joining the group. And since 1990s, they have been tracing their roots and rebooting their connections to Xiaqing. And after the 2000, Xiaqing Huang clansmen in Singapore has continuously supported the construction of their hometowns, helping to rebuild the temple in China, invested in their declining ancestral halls, things like that. And we can see on the donation boards, Singapore clansmen for the road towards the temple. This one is for the ancestral hall and also for the primary school. Well, on the other hand, Xiaqing Huang clan is also a cultural component of the Singapore Huang Federation, the Huangshi Zonghui. And they has established a more inclusive network through the World Huang Clan Conference. Well, Huangshi Zonghui is established in 1924. Well, this society aims to transcend all kind of geographical limitations and encompass clan associations across the entire Nanyang region. Well, the goal of this organization is to unify all clansmen from diverse backgrounds. They have been relocated several times and finally got their permanent clubhouse in 1950s. So how does Huangshi Zonghui and Ling Hongdong connect together? Well, it's always because on the person-centered network due to those influential leaders. The first one is Mr. Huang Hanzhong. This gentleman was born in Xiaqing and came to Singapore during his youth. He's one of the collaborators with the much more, sorry?
2 minutes.
Oh, okay. With the much more famous Lin Yishun, and he's both the founding member of Huangshi Zonghui and also a big supporter for Longfengdong. And Mr. MPW, the same. He's currently both the chairman of Huangshi Zonghui and the temple, and also a committee member of Singapore Federation of Chinese Clan Associations, Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So they are linking those organizations together, and they are actively participate in the World Huang Associations. They even host one of their yearly conference in Singapore back in 2008. But what is interesting is that the idea of ancestor has been renegotiated in this globalized context. Actually, those Xiaqing Huang clan, their ancestor can be traced back to Angong, who is the one entering Fujian. They belong to the Gangzhou Pai, but in Huangshi Zonghui, they are worshipping all the other ancestors of Huang, not really in their branch. But there used to be a lot of debates internally about why we are worshipping this ancestor instead of the other one, why him, why not him, things like that. So in order to embrace the larger community, everyone has to be negotiable to seek a common ground. That common ground is Yunggong. Yunggong is sort of the Lao Zuzong who is able to unify all the Huang clansmen from different regions. So from the location of World Huang Clans Kinship Conference, we can see they are really building a very big, widespread network transnationally. And always there will be trade and commerce expos associated with the World Huang Conference. So in conclusion, we can see that for the ancestral temple, it's more of a one-to-one closed circle connection, goes inwards. And for the surname association, it can be a more collective force, which is like a one-to-all networking, and it goes outwards and expanding. Well, at the same time, they can keep a close relationship with their hometown and also becoming one of the influential nodes on the transregional network. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Qi. Now let's invite Ken, the next speaker, to share your screen.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to join in and share some of my recent research just before COVID in Kolkata. So let me begin right away. As you all know, India is the birthplace of Buddhism, and the central sites include Sarnath, Bodh Gaya, and Nalanda, from which many strands of Buddhism spread to Southeast Asia, to China, and to Japan and Korea, Sri Lanka as well, of course, and Southeast Asia. Here is a scene from Bodh Gaya. This is from Sarnath, and in Sarnath, in the 20s and 30s, a Singaporean group built a Chinese temple, the Chinese Buddhist temple, erected by Li Chun-sing, who was the head of the Buddhist Lodge here in Singapore. And here's a picture of him, also director of the OCBC Bank. And in the 50s, we had a continuation of Buddhist diplomacy, with Zhou Enlai receiving a lot of monks from India and sending back to Nehru this relic of Xuanzang, which includes inside of it a crystal case with a bone from Xuanzang's skull. So this was a very precious relic that was intended to be the basis of a Xuanzang monastery in that area in India. But it took a very long time for that to be realized, of course, because shortly after this gift was presented by the Dalai Lama to Nehru, the border war broke out in '62. So it was not until the early 2000s that the project went forward to build the Xuanzang Hall at Nalanda. And subsequently, there were visits to India by Xi Jinping, who was brought to Modi's hometown, which he claims Xuanzang also visited and stayed in. And then when Modi went back to China, he was brought to the Baimasa that Xuanzang had, the White Goose Temple, Baimasa in Luoyang, that Xuanzang had been based in for some time. Okay, this is the current Xuanzang monastery in the Nalanda region. You can see it's pretty much in an empty zone, very interesting. Has an inscription describing Xuanzang's famous voyage to India. Now, the Chinese Buddhist Forum, World Buddhist Forum, has tried very hard to bring in people from around the world, with some success. The Indian International Buddhist Forum has also tried to do similar types of projects, but Chinese scholars did not attend their 2023 event. However, according to their director, they had participated in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Shared Buddhist Heritage Conference held in Delhi in March of that year. This is the conference announcement for this major new initiative in association with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meetings in Delhi. And parallel to that, Nalanda University, which has also had a very rocky start, announced that they would be establishing a chair on shared Buddhist heritage as part of the commemoration of India's taking over the presidency of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. So Buddhist diplomacy is happening again. This is a scene from contemporary Nalanda University. There's been, however, at that same meeting, the meeting in Delhi, the Indian side refused to sign the paragraph supporting the Belt and Road Initiative, which goes reaffirming their support. We have Kyrgyzstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and so forth, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all are involved, but India refused to sign on. The reason for this is pretty clear. If you look at the maps of the BRI, it sort of encircles and excludes India for the most part, but with one exception, one interesting exception. The Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar road down here, which both sides have been involved in claiming that it preceded the BRI. Now that, and of course, India has also been very involved in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank, and these have led to very major projects within India as well. So India, of course, has another card in its pocket, which is the Northern Transport Corridor linking Mumbai to Moscow via Iran. That's something they're working on as well. Now, I'd like to bring this discussion back to a kind of lower level than state-to-state relations or large-scale investments, and talk a little bit about the Indian community in Kolkata. You can see here the concentration of points around the Toretta Bazaar of the Cantonese community and around Tangra of the Hakka community in the tanning trade. But there are a couple other points out here you see, and these are both Chinese Buddhist monasteries established by Indian community of Kolkata at different times in the 60s. Now the 60s was a bad time to build a temple. This is the Zhonghua Fo Si, which according to this inscription was completed in 62, just before the war broke out. And then only finally reopened in 72, 10 years later. In between, most of the Chinese residents of Calcutta were moved to internment camps in Rajasthan. A lot of their property was impounded. The community suffered a serious blow. It took many, many years to recover their status and to get passports, and many have subsequently moved to Toronto and other places. This temple never fully recovered. It's built, but not too much activity is going on inside the temple, we're told. We do know the history of the original founding group, thanks to the research of Zhang Xing in this area, but it seems to be rather dormant. Another very interesting figure in this story is Wu Qian Fa-shi, who became a monk in Xi'an, and then in his teens moved to Tibet, where he spent many years studying Buddhist logic and Madhyamaka scriptures, including Madhyamaka Svatantrika scriptures of the Ornament of Clear Realization School, which have never been translated before from Tibetan into Chinese. He set out to do that throughout his life, and he ended up moving from Tibet first to India, where he actually served as an abbot in Sarnath and in some of the Shenzang-related temples, and then had a vision to build his own temple in Kolkata, which he tried to set up in 68. This is the Shenzang temple in Kolkata. That was his vision. He tried to set up a Buddhist seminary there, but it didn't last very long. And ultimately, he abandoned the temple and moved to Hong Kong, where he continued his translation work, translating scriptures from Tibetan into Chinese. But these are some scenes from the Shenzang temple. Shows you some of the deities, some of the murals, and some of the altars, and the library, and an image of Shenzang himself. This is the Buddhist monk from Taiwan who took over after him and kept it going for another 20 years during fairly difficult times. A couple inscriptions are found there, one from 1979 and another from 1992. basically showing different stages in the effort to keep the monastery moving and alive. And very interesting from this 2018, we have the Shanghai Consul General, Mr. Ma, in Kolkata, along with the head of the Buddhist Federation of China, coming to consecrate a new temple to be built on the grounds of the Shenzong Monastery. So an initiative to keep up Buddhist diplomacy once again. Now, I think we need to see all of that in the context of the original Chinese community of Kolkata, and why they would have people who would be open to and interested in this developments. And for that, we need to go back to the 1778 or 1781 in this case, where Yang Daozhao, the first Chinese merchant, comes to the region, bringing tea, is given land to set up a sugar factory, and does that a few miles outside of Kolkata. This is his tomb with the inscription of his name and so forth. And this is the temple nearby, the Fudici temple. And in that temple, we have a shrine, and we have probably the earliest inscription from 1825, shortly after his death. He died in the early 1800s. But this may be carved by his successors. I'm still trying to figure out the names. I'd appreciate any help I could get. In any case, we have a lot more inscriptions from that temple showing that it was managed by the Yixing or the Gihing society, which is a kind of secret society famous throughout Southeast Asia, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, and in Myanmar, and also in India. So that organization is still very active in keeping up this tomb and some of these sites. Getting back down to the sites, here's a list of a number of them, maps of them, and you can see the red points in this map are all these types of sites in the Tureti Bazaar area. This story has been told by Tan Sen, so I'm very grateful for his research on this particular temple, which is about the Ranliang Buddha temple of Sihui, an area outside of Canton. As he's shown in his articles, these are local Buddhas from the Guangdong area who became revered as followers of Huineng after many centuries after Huineng had been down there, and whose statues were carried throughout the diaspora, first to Malaysia and then probably to Kolkata, as you see them here. So there are some interesting sources, a very detailed 1906 inscription, and a very detailed register of their organizational decision-making. So we're starting to transcribe these, but I won't have time to go into detail here. But they do provide a great deal of detail on the early organizational methods and practices for these types of associations. Yeah. Okay, so there are a number of other organizations. This is the Sihui one, Siyi one, sorry, that also worships Guanyin. And so Guanyin worship, here we see a Guangshu Sanshi Yinyan inscription. And there are some interesting booklets relating to the temple within the association building, the Guanyin Miao. And there are some Guanyin scriptures that are still circulated and used there to some extent. So we have this type of information. From other of these larger association buildings, we see a continued worship of Buddhism in the local population. Guanyin is the key, but this is Shakyamuni Buddha. This is the Jixing, the Yixing Huiguan from 1920. There's a cast bell from the same date. The Mazu temple, in some cases, Mazu is worshipped alongside Guanyin. This includes some very interesting inscriptions as well. As you can see, quite a few inscriptions from this temple, which will hopefully get us a little more detailed view of that community and its evolution over time. There are also a lot of Shenju Pai that we can try to include in this process of documenting that community. The Nanshun Huiguan nearby also has a number of inscriptions, which we're trying to decipher. And coming back to Buddhism, there's contemporary Buddhist groups from Taiwan, like the Fogongshan is here.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So that's interesting in its own right. You see Xingyun Fasher over there. And this is Iguandao, also taking over one of the factories in the Tangra area and bringing in a Guanyin hall and their own recent modern inscriptions claiming their own direct descent from Huineng and the Shakyamuni Buddha into their current group of leaders. There are several cemeteries in the region that would also merit further research. These are all cemeteries that have inscriptions, and tombs all have lots of inscriptions. So we hope over time to be able to gather even more evidence of the history of that community. There's a interesting temple here worshipping Kali, built by the Chinese, and I find it a very interesting example of hybridity in worship practices in India as well as in Singapore, where we have this spirit medium possessed by Kali sometimes and other times possessed by Guanyin. So with that, I think I have to end my presentation, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to bring out an individual we have the political level of Buddhist diplomacy, but there's also the popular level, and then we have some extraordinary individuals such as Wu Qian, who help bridge those two communities to the two levels by their own efforts to build Buddhist temples in Kolkata. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Now we have the 4 wonderful presentations. Before I invite our discussant, I want to remind all the participants, in case you're not with us yesterday, you're welcome to type in your question in the check box. Later, when we collect questions, we will have invite you to have briefly state your question. Now, it's 2 minutes past 1. We are very good with time. So can I please invite Anna, our discussant, to give us comment? You have
yes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for these 4 extremely rich presentations. So in my comments, I will mostly focus on Emily and Ken's papers, simply because these are the only papers that I received. But towards the end of my comments, I will also try to pose some questions for the other 2 presentations by Sisi and Kang and by Chi. So let me begin by just saying that all of these papers, if I had to choose keywords to sort of highlight the main takeaways from these 4 papers, that would be flexibility and inclusivity and resilience and transnationality, while Emily and Dean's papers highlight the flexibility and inclusivity of Chinese religions among the diasporic Chinese communities in South and Southeast Asia. Wang, Sisi, and Kang's paper focuses on the resilience of transnational religious business networks. And then finally, Wuqi's presentation points to the resilience of ancestral networks and their religious ties that tie them back to mainland China. So let me jump straight into it. I will begin with Emily's paper. So this article really ties together, in my opinion, some of the keywords of the BRINFAITH project: religion, the BRI, infrastructure. So these 3 main keywords, and I believe personally that as such provides a potential conceptual framework to draw from for other project participants. This is just a suggestion. I would like to hear your opinions on that later. So as you heard from Emily, the research was based for 10 years. It's an ongoing project, that's my understanding, in West Kalimantan among the local Chinese Indonesian community who are Hakka and who are searching for belonging amidst the growing international role of what Emily describes in her paper as rising China. And what I find particularly captivating about this paper is this concept of Yinfrastructure, where Yin is the Yin from Yin Yang. So it's this emic concept that Emily mobilizes to talk about a type of shadow infrastructure that lurks beneath the more dominant infrastructures developed both by the Indonesian state and different Chinese bilateral investments, some of them also part of the BRI. So these infrastructures built by both states can be described, and Emily actually refers to them as such as the Yang structures of the state, Yang as opposed to the Yin of the shadow infrastructure. I find it really interesting. So let me jump to the question. So first of all, Emily in the paper criticizes the tendency in literature to describe the migratory patterns of Chinese groups as framed mostly in economic aspects. And she highlights that these Hakka Chinese in West Kalimantan try to escape these stereotypes of Chinese in Indonesia as wealthy, as greedy, and sort of distance themselves from the paranoid rhetoric of China's global domination. And she highlights the word ambivalence that they experience when facing, when thinking about wealth and business. So I want to inquire further as to what they're ambivalent about. You mentioned their precarious positionality as Chinese in Indonesia, where many persecution took place during the Suharto era. And I want to ask, is there any moral ambivalence that these Indonesian Chinese experience about wealth, about prosperity, but also when confronted with some of the extractive aspects of China's infrastructural projects in Indonesia or in West Kalimantan specifically? Or maybe these projects are not perceived as extractive by these Hakka Chinese or other ethnic group in the region. So that's an open question. You also mentioned that that's a detail, but I was interested to know more. You said that the Hakka dialect has thrived in Singkawang and also among non-Chinese residents. So could you maybe say more about this? Who are these non-Chinese, and through what channels has Hakka thrived? I was quite intrigued by this statement. So when talking about shadow infrastructure or Yinfrastructure, Emily, you highlight three characteristics of this type of infrastructure. It is hidden from public view, it is distinct and separate from state structures, and it is also esoteric and sacred. So I have a kind of a bigger question here, both to Emily and other presenters. Can we productively apply this concept of shadow infrastructure to describe China's involvement in other types of religious infrastructures, meaning beyond transnational Chinese religious movements as described by Emily? So for example, can we think of Chinese involvement in Christian worship modalities in Africa? We had a separate panel on this topic during the conference in Hong Kong last week. Can we think of these types of Chinese involvement in local forms of religiosity as a type of shadow infrastructure based on these three characteristics outlined by Emily? And Emily also mentioned that the shadow infrastructures has certain material consequences. And here she provides examples of temples back in mainland China financing local infrastructural projects there. So I want to inquire about the local context. What are some of the material consequences of this shadow infrastructure in West Kalimantan? And then also, as an anthropologist, of course, I need to ask more about methodology. You mentioned that you've been working in West Kalimantan for over 10 years, and that's where some of the more general statements come from. And I'm particularly curious about sort of your linguistic background when doing field work. How were you communicating with your interlocutors? I mean, those Indonesian Chinese, was it mostly in Bahasa, Indonesian, or was it in Hakka, or sort of a mixture of both? I would like to know more. Yes. So when it comes to Emily's paper, I think my main question would be about this concept of shadow infrastructure, and whether we can think of it more broadly beyond the context of West Kalimantan. And then I will jump to Ken's paper, a very rich account of what I believe to be possibly an ongoing survey of Chinese temples, monasteries, regional associations, and cemeteries of Kolkata. And again, I finished talking about Emily's paper, sort of pointing to her methodology. And here I also want to ask, this project seems like a collective endeavor. Can you often refer to researchers as we in plural. So I would like to just know a little more as an anthropologist again about how long has this project been going on, and what was your methodology? How was all this very rich information collected? How did you get access to all these different sites? So a few words about that would be appreciated. And also, of course, I would like to know, since this conference topic touches a lot on the BRI project and infrastructures, I would like to know more whether and how these Buddhist cultural resources in India that sort of connect the two countries or civilizations are engaged in the rhetoric of China's global rise through the BRI by Chinese state agents. So if you could share a few words about that, that would, I think, provide more context for everybody. And then finally, again, this is more of a ethnographic curiosity. Towards the end of your presentation and also in your paper, you mentioned the Guandao group teaching religious courses. In the paper, you specified that they teach to local factory workers. So I would like to know more on this. This looks like a fascinating ethnographic case. What draws these Indian workers to this group? So I will finish here with my discussion of the papers I've received and then move on to the remaining two presentations. So maybe first pose a question for Wang, Sisi, and you, Kang. So in your presentation, you pose this very large, very broad question: how has religion shaped the business? And this is in the context of Wen Zhanfa and the embroidery business in Singapore. Again, very rich presentation, so I will sort of target my question at a specific detail. Towards the end of your presentation, you mentioned that today this business looks more like a Chinese cultural emporium rather than a small store as it started. So since your presentation mostly touches on historical issues, so I would like to ask you to share a little bit more on how does this business look like today? Is it linked to any forms of like religious tourism to Singapore or transnational religious tourism? I would like to know more about the current situation. So that will be my question for you. And then moving on, lastly, to Wuqi's presentation about the legacy of the Huang clan in Singapore. Again, in your presentation, you mostly talk about. Yes, I think someone has it muted.
2 minutes, by the way.
Sorry. So Wuqi, towards the end of your presentation, you mentioned the World Huang Conference and how it was linked to some sort of business event, expos, trade shows. So, I would like to know a little bit more about this, because this again nicely ties religion and business, just like the previous presenters did. So I would like to know a little more about this. And you also mentioned some of the people from the Huang clan traveling to their ancestral village, to their ancestral temple. So can we see this as a form of religious tourism in any ways? And are there any brokers or organizations that facilitate this? I would like to know more. So I will stop here and looking forward to your responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your comment and question. Now I would like to invite 4 speakers, but actually 5 authors. Based on your presentation order, can you respond to discussants' comment, please?
I will go first, and I'll try to be brief. Thank you so much for your detailed reading and bringing out these questions. So I'd like to start with the question of what the ambivalence is about wealth. And of course, there's the crux. One of the crux of the matter is a kind of widespread appreciation of prosperity and trying to generate wealth. And there's particularly a big desire to become your own boss, to be able to somehow raise yourself up through your own enterprise, right? And so this is like really, if you talk to young people particularly, it's a really, really huge aspiration for people. And yet that has to be tempered with the fact that to be also seen as too wealthy can feed into stereotypes and can feed into this kind of perception, which I consider to be quite a misperception, that, you know, that the Chinese are economically dominant in Indonesia. So one of the things that's happening most recently, which people rarely speak about, is that actually more and more non-Chinese people are involved in business at all levels. And that's really changed the local scene. Anyways, there's a big, you can see mostly in people's interactions in the public sphere how this plays out. And there's a lot of kind of collective ethics about how to be a good person with money and how to be a good investor and capitalist. So this, you can see this really clearly when there's a series of interactions that take place at Chinese temple gods' birthday parties, in which there's always people from overseas and Jakarta returning home to these temples to have their fu reactivated, and they participate in these extraordinary displays of wealth in the leilang, in the auctioning of these altar objects. Meanwhile, the banquet in these is full of all the local people in the area of the catchment of the temple, right? And so you get so there's that. There's also a local discourse about how to become wealthy without alienating your friends, without alienating the people who you grew up with, right? So there's a morality about acquisition of wealth. And then the other piece, which I'm trying to link to this, is the fact that a lot of local people are really in awe of some of the infrastructural developments that are taking place, including a power plant, a huge power plant just outside of Singkawang, the new capital, which is going to be largely sponsored by Chinese investors, the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail line. So they're in awe of these things, but they're completely outside of the range of possibilities of having the level of wealth needed, or even the kind of skills needed to participate as partners in those projects. So there's that. Also, that is the thing I'm trying to say. There's also this concept of palmery and like how to profit and how to, you know, how it's morally okay to profit, which I feel like is something that comes together in Indonesia with concepts of, you know, worshiping Chai Shen and seeking wealth and that being okay, and that being like a very respectable goal, a good thing, with really different views about wealth acquisition coming from Islam in Indonesia. And so that's something that people are negotiating, I guess is what I'm saying. In terms of the material consequences of shadow infrastructure, I'm going to try to sort of like merge this with the last point you made. There's a lot of the temple building that's happening, and these creation of these religious communities happens by business people. They sponsor the temples, and they, you know, quite frequently will have like a dream or an encounter or a spirit encounter that leads to the establishment of the temple and the temple community, and it starts from there, right? And so that's another interesting way where these things are crossing over, right? In terms of methodology, I obviously speak Indonesian fluently, and I learned Indonesian to do my research. It was the language most accessible to learn, coming from Canada. And then when I got to my field site, I started learning the local Hakka dialect. So my data has primarily come from documenting all the gods' birthday parties, going to nightly consultations with spirit mediums, and listening to interactions, and and asking questions and communicating where appropriately, and then of course interviewing all the spirit mediums and the temple committee members, in addition to just the participant observation piece of that. And And then a kind of interesting methodology that I've had recently is I've been, during the pandemic, when I wasn't able to be in these kind of like group settings as easily, I got permission from 6 different spirit mediums in different parts of the city with different temples to place an audio recorder on their altar and record nighttime consultations. And then I could use that and so I've got all the transcripts from that. And of course, I can't. Not every person who came individually, agreed to be a part of that. So I can't use that data specifically, but I can use it generally to inform this perspective, right? I think that may be I think those are the main questions that you had for now. So thanks again.
Thank you. Sisi and Kang.
Okay, so thank you for Prof. Anna's question. So for nowadays, Dianhua still at a shop in Geylang, and also the 3rd generation of the owner also still was the board member of Xiu Tan, and this shop still import embroidery from China. But now, since the improvement of the communication and also transportation, they no longer order the gongtai for the charitable horse, because they can order directly from the factory in China. And also, since in 1970s and 80s, they import a lot of goods from China, so now they still have a lot of old things in their warehouse. So now it became a place for people to find the old things in this store. If you were interested in the things in 1980s and 90s, you can visit this shop and you definitely find the things you are interested. And also now the main business for this shop is offer some products related to the weddings or some festivals. So people now order hongcai from this shop. And also, since this shop has a lot of things related to the opera, but now most of the opera in Singapore are dissolved. So this became something just hang in the shop. When customer work in or the visitor come to this shop, the owner Miss Chief just give instruction about these things and give more like a cultural guide to learn the Chinese culture. So the owner just call his shop as a Chinese culture shop. So now the current situation of the shop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kang. May I welcome Qi?
Hi, maybe I want to let me show my slides a bit here. Okay, so you can see talking about China's involvement in the World Huang Kinship Conference, we can see that Taiwan is quite influential back in the 80s. And when it comes to the 2000s, mainland China is definitely coming up, especially after 2010. You can see all the way from 2015 to 2017, mainland China's different cities are hosting the whole conference. And talking about business elements, of course, business elements, they definitely add on to the motivation for people to join all those conferences. And it is a transregional, transnational network. So it is really good for trading business. And also, we can see that there is a trend. Business people, they concern more about transregional, transnational network instead of what is happening locally at their place. they cares more about networking and expanding. Yeah, so I think that's my viewpoint from this case. Thanks.
Thank you, Qi. May I invite Ken?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks especially to Anna for her questions, and I apologize for sending the paper so late to you, but I appreciate your thoughtful reading and interesting questions. In terms of methodology, it's we tried to combine historical gathering of local historical sources with kind of anthropological interviews and surveys and participation in events where possible. I've only had a few opportunities to visit the area, so others have done far more extensive research. Zhang Xin and Tan Sen Sen and many others have really led the way to the study of this community. I think that the inscriptions can provide new insights into history of organization, history of their differentiation over time. And I look forward to gathering these sources with whoever would like to assist. In terms of the BRI, I mentioned in the paper today that there's a level of national use of Buddhist diplomacy to create new connections, and that seems to be starting up again after periods of on and off, very interesting periods of in which it wasn't effective, but might have been more effective at a lower level through consuls, consul generals, local institutions, and that sort of thing, rather than state to state level. And that relates to a question that Tencent just sent me about people like Teochew, who indeed has an inscription in the one of these local regional associations, and whether it's a Buddhist orthodoxy that's being transmitted or some acceptance of the heterodox or regional local forms of Buddhism, where local gods are Buddhist monks, and Guanyin is a big part of the worship. So there, I think we do have to consider whether Emily's ideas can be spread even more widely. This Yinfrastructure, which I really like, is a kind of a non-state, popular, organically forming kinds of networks, alternative networks across the region that definitely builds a lot of buildings, builds roads in China, builds schools, builds hospitals, has very many infrastructural features. As we saw in Sisi and Yukang's paper too, the business and the religious activities are totally integrated. So we're really getting closer to something like Batai's general economy at this point, where religion and economics are joined together in some response to the excesses of capitalism. I think it's a very interesting set of questions that I hope others can explore elsewhere in the conference. Some specific questions about the Iguandao workers. They are the workers in the factory, and they have to attend the study sessions. They have no choice. So whether that, as David Palmer asked, is if it's just part of a broader expansion strategy, I think the answer is yes. A lot of these groups have sought to build in Mumbai and other places. So the Kolkata is one of the important stops, centers, but there are likely to be more and other parts of India. Let me see if there's, and Yungja asked about the Hinduization and the status of the Indian community now. It's really very much in decline. And there's a huge issue around cultural preservation, with the population having shrunk from probably over 30 or maybe 50,000 down to 2,000 or 3,000 at the present time, with the majority of the conservation initiative now coming from the community secondary migration to Toronto. So it really will require a lot of collective work, scholars as well as others in the community there, and members of the extended migration to preserve some of these sites before they're just eliminated. So yeah, I think that answers some, hopefully that answers some of the questions. There's a lot more one could say about each of these issues. But thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ken. Now we have 25 minutes. Stay with yesterday's practice. I would like to invite a question first from our chat room. I wonder if Harry, Jules, would you like to briefly stay or explain your question? And I understand Ken already answered some of the question in the chat room, but the other participant, you are welcome to just turn on your mic and speak freely to the speaker, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Weishan. Okay. I'm glad to meet you again, Emily. I'm Hari from Indonesia. I'm curious. First, how Chinese Indonesian you're studying currently define their religious identity? Do they define as Confucianism or indigenous religion followers? Also, have you observed any instance where the Chinese religion belief hybrid with other religions like Christianity or Islam, or any different ones among the subjects you are researching? And the last, how the BRI frame or affects these dynamics? Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Nice to see you again. So this sort of relates to a conversation that we started in the first part of this workshop, right? About Confucianism and it being a kind of a problematic misnomer in Indonesia. So if I'm speaking to locals, they will say that they baisin, and it means they pray to a variety of gods, right? And that will, I mean, if they're people who are following, you know, Chinese popular religion, right? So people generally will not identify with Konghuchu unless they're trying to describe themselves to a non-Chinese Indonesian person who only recognizes in their mind this category Konghuchu, right? So that they have to kind of self-objectify according to the categories proposed by the state, that's what they are. But like I say, in Singapore, very few people actually have on their identity card Konghuchu. Because during the time period when Confucianism was not recognized, was not one of the official religions, people adopted other identifications. So a lot of people at that time just became Buddhists for their identification papers. And this means in some cases that they do go to Buddhist temples. It also means that they go to Buddhist temples and these other kinds of temples. And that's not problematic. And so what I would like to suggest is that there is quite a big fluidity for some people who go to kind of more doctrinal Buddhist centers, but then will also go to God's birthday parties and events on, you know, and also pray on the 1st and the 15th of the month at these smaller temples, or go to Buddhist temples, but also seek spirit medium help for certain kinds of health issues and other things, right? So there's that kind of fluidity, right? You know, as you see with probably most religions, there will always be people for whom they're more focused on just one at the exclusion of others. But there's also this big group of people for whom it's okay to pick and choose. And then that relates to your second question. So there are currently, there's a lot of hybridization between Chinese religion and indigenous practices, Dayak specific practices. And I'm working on a separate piece right now, which is all about this. And so basically what's happened over the last 20 years is that there's been an enormous amount of Dayak spirits and gods imagined to be of either Dayak or mixed ethnic origins that have been incorporated into Chinese spirit medium practices with altars, cultivating spirits. They come out in the Chapgo May procession, people constantly seeking them for advice. And while those spirits are not ontologically distinct in Dayak cosmology, they're really a product of Chinese worshippers' imaginations. They're starting to affect indigenous religions in a big way, such that there are now Dayak spirit mediums, which there weren't before. There are Dayak spirit mediums who are actually having their own altars, who are starting to receive people who are having annual birthday celebrations of their places of worship, like the Chinese tradition. There's also Chinese spirit mediums who are not only having an altar inside their house for a Dayak god, but they're also using a patak, which is a specific, Dayak form. It's a wooden effigy, and so they're also becoming more Dayak in that way. And there's these people who are becoming the Dayak people who are becoming a little more Chinese in this space that there's this other thing being created, right? So that's happening. The connections between Christianity and Islam are a lot more tenuous, and that's where borders and boundaries are a little bit more rigidly maintained. So there's at least one, I think maybe two spirit mediums in Singkawang who have Muslim saints, who are possessed by Muslim saints, and it can be controversial. So there are people who go and seek specific advice from them, but sometimes if they try to participate in the Chapko May procession, they face negative feedback, right? The other thing is that the Chapko May procession is a huge procession of spirit mediums that happens on the 15th of the first month. So, the end of the Chinese New Year period. And in the city of Singkawang, it brings thousands of people to the streets. And there's like hundreds of spirit mediums, and really everybody in the local community participates in some way, either as people who carry the palanquins, or as the mediums, or the people who carry the flags, do the music, everything. In that parade, the Malay population, who are Muslim, mostly cover their faces, like wear balaclavas and so like it's a bit odd. Like there's like they're participating, and yet they don't fully want to show their faces. So there are lines that are a little bit more challenging. And then finally Christianity. So for Catholics, there's quite a few Catholics that go, and there's quite an old established Catholic community there who also tend to go to Chinese temple activities. And for Protestants, it's much more frowned upon. So in my previous work about migration, I found that Hakka Chinese from Singkawang who go overseas often end up getting involved in kind of like charismatic Pentecostal churches while overseas as a way of forming community by and large. And that sometimes comes back to Singkawang in the form of creating new communities of worship there, which can and cannot have long-lasting effects, such that there's people who end up kind of reverting or whatever. So that I think that gives you a bit of a better sense of that.
Thank you, Emily. I'd like to ask speaker just hold on for a second, pause for a second, and we still have one or two more questions from the chat room. And I also like to invite all the participants to speak up if you have a question. Let's collect question first for interaction purpose. And then later we will save time for all speakers to respond to all the questions. Next one will be Joe's.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. It was well, thank you all. Amazing presentations, but your case relates a lot. You remember the case I was presenting here in Hong Kong with the giant Guanjin. And my question is not exactly how these communities relate to China with the One Belt One Road, because what I see is we have a local agency interconnecting with other communities by different means, creating a parallel. I mean, I love this Yinfrastructure that applies to many levels, but how they instrumentalize China and the One Belt One Road and this Chinese identity to use it to connect with others, not only locally but also in ASEAN or at supranational levels. That would be my primary question. And I have a second one, because we have this in Laos during the last Yaotu festival in mainland in 2016. The Chinese government was inviting representatives on the Lanteng Yao community. So they were calling people from different ethnicities to participate in these national festivals. So it was an official attempt from the Chinese government use the nationalities as a infrastructure to promote the One Belt One Road and Chinese soft power. So do you have something like this going on also in your community? Those are the questions, and thank you so much.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Wait a second, Emily. We still have one more question. Rajana, are you online? Can you turn on your camera? I would like to invite other participants. Do you have a question? Now is also a good time to jump in. You can speak directly to the speaker. Okay, there's a question written in the chat box for Ken. And we have roughly 15 minutes. So perhaps I would like to invite Emily and Ken to respond first.
Thank you. Just briefly, there are all kinds of networks in Singapore right now. There's Iguantao, there's Maitreya, there's Tsuchi, there's the Tupac Kong Association, there's the True Buddha School, there's Vipassana networks, and then there's all of these individual networks that people are creating on their own. So the one that I find really interesting is this case of Fa Ju Gong and the Fa Ju Gong Temple, which has started to, so one medium started to be possessed by this new god, and the god, it has a fantastic story about the god had come down and decided to possess this guy in Singapore, and then he started to go back to China and to the place where this deity originated, and now they do these annual pilgrimages where they go back and they bring statues that are probably made in China, sent to Singapore, then bought and then purchased and then brought back and reactivated in the temple there. And so there's something very interesting happening there. So those are the individual networks. So then there's also, it's also getting connected with this kind of like revival of associational life in Singapore, because associations were also prohibited for a long time, and now they're being revived. And some of the temple communities are now really resembling associations and doing sort of like social good deeds. And they are starting to define their religious community based on these charitable acts. So there's that interesting. There's also a Buddhist crematorium being built, or if maybe it's already finished, and they have a proposal to build a Buddhist university, and they have I recently went a massive land that has been purchased and is being cleared in this very remote area on the outskirts of Singapore that's going to be this huge, massive temple complex. So this is what I'm, coming back to Anna's question too, is like the kind of the material consequences of this Yinfrastructure. It's there, and it's sort of rivaling the BRI stuff. And then I'm pretty sure your second question, I can't fully remember what your second question was, but oh yes. From what I know, there hasn't been that much of like people from China trying to recruit local people to come and represent China in that way. But there's been a lot of literature about how Indonesia feels kind of ambivalent about Chinese investment because of its own, anxieties over Chineseness. So there's that. There's definitely that as a primary obstacle. Thank you.
So to respond to Ranjana's question about whether there are new entrants from China taking over the running of Chinese temples in Kolkata, I would say so far we've seen cases more from Taiwan with Iguandao, Guang, and some of the others who have this very transnational focus and have built on that for already now a couple decades, or if not longer. So there are people trying to be involved from the broader diaspora. And this sort of relates to Wu Qi's point that the clan associations can very rapidly rise to a global level. There can be global effects of these kinds of migratory groups finding common cause. So at the same time as the temples are indeed involuting, as she mentioned, for the Singapore case, there's this expanded networking at a higher level that through different or related networks that can then have an effect back down on the concrete local level. So I think those are the kinds of dynamics we need to pay attention to throughout this type of research. But yeah, so that's what I think.
Can I ask a question, a follow-up?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Ken. Since you have done so much work on Southeast Asian temples and Fujian as well, so I wanted to ask you what similarities or differences you found with regard to the Kolkata temples and maybe the deities as well. Are they exceptional? Because most of the connections I see are with Guangdong rather than Fujian. So that's why I was asking if you found anything on Fujian. The other aspect is the disappearance of knowledge about their ancestral homeland. It seems that they have no idea what these idols that they are worshipping are. Do you find that in Southeast Asia as well? And then with regard to the last point you made, Ken, I think what some of the groups are doing is to reconnect to China. Given the geopolitical issues, the state cannot come in, so the BRI is absolutely a non-factor there. But the individual groups reconnecting to, let's say, Sihui, in my case, are taking place. And so this idea about forgetting their heritage, their past, is that common in Southeast Asia? So I'm just trying to ask what you find similarities and differences between Calcutta and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I do think it's a very interesting question. I think it varies tremendously across the region. Generally speaking, there's a lot of concern amongst the communities here that the younger generation will not follow in their practices. But at the same time, there's a lot of creativity in these systems too, generating new ritual practices and new deities and finding local deities in the region, or mixing and combining different groups of deities to find as a way to create a bridge to another group. So I think that there's a great deal of sense of anxiety over this issue, but for the most part, the Southeast Asian community sees itself in the kind of historical context of having returned to Fujian and Guangdong and rebuilt the local religious infrastructure there after the Cultural Revolution and carrying ritual knowledge back. They tend, for the most part, to see themselves as actually a stronger resource for other parts of this diaspora than, and even though people in China don't need their money anymore, they sometimes still give them some respect for their ritual knowledge and their past contribution at that specific moment in time. So I think that's probably, there's not much that I found in Kolkata from the Fujian communities. So yeah, I haven't seen further evidence of those kinds of networks, but the Guangdong ones and the Hakka ones are, yeah, losing touch as those communities die off, as you know. So it really is quite urgent to bring out the sources, translate them, make them available in various languages so that people can draw on some of that historical material and reassess the cultural value and heritage and significance of those communities. So I hope that answers your question.
More question from the floor? Emily, Yongjia, earlier David also posed question.
I had a question. So I actually had a question for Wuqi. Thanks so much for your presentation. I love your work so much. As you know, I'm somebody who's very interested in kampong and all the transformations of kampong. You had this one thing that you had at the end of your presentation, which was renegotiated ancestor, was the final bullet point. And I just love this idea. And I wondered how you were planning to use this or work with this theoretically, if so.
Hello, Emily. Thanks for your interest and the question. So, actually, at first, I didn't know that their real close ancestor is not in the ones they are worshiping. I joined their gala night for the spring festive. They are worshiping their ancestors in a 5-star hotel function room, and it's very grandiose, the whole activity. And I didn't know that. And they start to sing their 祖训歌, their ancestor teaching song. And after that, I asked one of the person besides me, okay, so which branch are you from? Which is your ancestor? Because they are worshiping to 3 different portraits. And the gentleman told me that his is not on the board, his close ancestor. But it feels like he's really faithful and respectful when he's singing the 祖训歌 and praying to the ancestor. Then I realized that, okay, maybe this is normal in their community. So I start to ask around and to chat with people. Then I realized that there used to be debates about why we are choosing this ancestor instead of the other one. Because Yun Gong is the one who is able to unify all. And when does Yun Gong live? He lives in the legendary period of China, which is untraceable. So he's really early enough to be able to host everyone. And other than that, the others is like they have to cater about the global context. The reason why they put Chunshen Gong there, because Chunshen Gong actually is not really related to Nanyang Chinese, because Chunshen Gong is the one who is the ancestor for people of the northern part of China, mainly Wuhan in their case. So it's really weird that they put Chunshen Gong as one of the 3 important figures in their current ancestral hall. But they say that because they want to play with World Huang conference people, and World Huang conference people, those people from the northern part of China, they are really playing important roles in the conference. And also, Chunshen Gong is famous enough compared to others in their ancestor trees. So they have all different kind of considerations instead of really think about what is their real roots. Who is their real ancestor? I mean, the close one. Yeah, that's it.
We have a few more minutes only. Any final question or thought from the audience first? If not, can I invite each speaker? You only have 30 seconds to 1 minute to any concluding remark before we finish this panel. Maybe we will give opportunity to Sisi and Kang, who received last question first.
Okay, thank you. I think Prof. Dean already gave a good conclusion for our paper in the whole panel. So I think, so thank you very much, Prof. Dean, and thank you for all listening.
Okay, thank you, Kang.
I should say that Sisi and Kang are doing several related projects among some of the Singapore businesses, and finding these kinds of historical documents and their interconnections of these business networks with the religious networks. So we can look forward to more of these kinds of reports in the future, and we may be able to figure out developments in the network as a whole over time. Through this type of historical research as well. As I think we see the global stuff emerging with the rise of global communications and social media and transportation, so forth. All of these technologies are having very specific impacts on networking possibilities. And that's something to look back, steamship times and other telegraph times. Historically, this has a major impact on business operations in this region. So yeah, I'm excited to see more of this research going on here.
Thank you. In this remark, if there's no other burning question, I didn't see any question post in the check box. I think the time is 1:55. We are right on time. Please join me. Thanks all the 5 speakers during the Q&A. Thank you. Emily, Chin, Sisi, Kang, and Ken, thank you. And now we will have a break, and after the break will be the panel 5. Thank you.
To Weishan